What's going on, guys? This is your main man, Anwar Richardson, here from Orange Bloods. And see what happened was, and you know when someone starts off with what happened was, you're about to hear something interesting. All right, so I do all the recording and I do all the editing for these videos. And this time, as I was recording it on Zoom, what happened was I decided to record it on the cloud. Well, there was supposed to be a setting that made sure we had a full screen view. But what happened was I must not adjust to that setting. And so in this video that you're going to see, it's going to be a little bit different format than the other ones. It's going to be, one speaker, then another speaker, then another speaker, then another speaker. You won't see Ketch and I together in the same spot like you normally do. So this will be the anomaly, unless you guys say you love this format, but this will be the anomaly. We'll go back to the original stuff. Don't kill me. I'm learning on the job. I'm 40 something years old. I got 2 kids, had some with concussion. So forgive me as I'm trying to learn this. Hey, if you know any interns that want to do this and would take it off my hands, feel free to email me, or you know where to find me. But hey, listen, still hit the like button, still hit the subscribe button. I really appreciate you guys' support as always. Forgive me, because what happened was, let's get it started.
What's checking, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Orange Bloods Texas football YouTube channel. I'm Geoff Ketchum, joined by Anwar Richardson. Today is all about positivity. So positively, is that even a word? Positively. I just invented
Positively.
I added a few extra letters. Click on the like button. That's where I was going with this. If we're going to be positive today, hit the like button, subscribe. We do appreciate it. We'll be doing Texas football videos for the rest of the summer going into the season, and then we will take over and dominate your lives once there's actual football to talk about. Yesterday, Anwar, we spoke about the basement / floor of the 2021 Texas Longhorns in a world where they don't hit their heights, in a world where the quarterback play struggles, where there are offensive line injuries, where the defense doesn't develop playmakers for Pete Kwiatkowski's defense in year one. Like, in that world, we talked about what the worst case scenario would be. We ended up getting into a conversation about a big old slice of the pie and what would it look like if there was a piece of pie. And we both kind of agreed that 70% of the pie would probably be broken down between 8-4 and 9-3. Yeah. But there's another 30% that goes into the 10-2 and the 11-1 and the 12-0. And then, it goes backwards, right? There's a 7-5. And I suppose there's even like a 6-6 world where there's like a 1% or 2% sliver of the pie. Today, we're talking about what this team would need to do to hit its ceiling. What is the ceiling for the 2021 Texas Longhorns? I have a very definite ceiling in my head. I'm curious how close our ceilings are, because yesterday your floor and your ceiling were seemingly a game apart. So when I say optimal ceiling for this program in year one under Steve Sarkisian, where's your brain?
Well, I can't go to a 12-0 ceiling, right? That is just that is faith that no preacher could convince you of, right? So I can't go to mustard seed faith at this point. My initial thought is like 10-2 would be a really good ceiling for this team based off of everything. I want to try to talk myself into 11-1 as the ceiling, right? We're talking about everything goes correct, and we can break down what we think would need to happen for everything to go as best as possible. Year one, I'm going to go with 10-2 as probably the ceiling for this team. I can safely say 2 losses if I'm talking about ceiling, and we can talk about the particulars of it, but I'll start there so I don't go long-winded. I'll start with 10-2.
Yeah, I'm at 11-1. And okay, again, this goes into the same conversation we had yesterday. This may not be the thing that I think is most likely, But there's definitely a world for me that exists where Texas can go 11-1. It requires, against a really good schedule for Steve Sarkisian and this staff, to be every bit as elite as Texas fans. And look, Board of Regent members that have shelled out a lot of money to put together this group. Like, what in a world where they get what they pay for, and these players, a number of key ones develop quickly, I can see 11-1. To me, 10-2. Look, my over and under, same thing as yesterday. My over and under really is 8.5. And so if I think that 8 is on the bad side of the over and under, 7's only a game away. If 8.5 is my over and under for the season, then that means that 9 is the good part of my over and under, at which point 10 is 1 game away, 11 is 2 games away. It's a little bit of a further step, I suppose, than going to 7, but the schedule is really tough. But if we take Oklahoma out of the mix, I don't know that I'm ready to say that Texas is better than Iowa State. In fact, I know I'm not. But in a world where they're good enough to win that game, which I think Texas, if Texas played an A game in Ames, they'll beat Iowa State. Because an A game means they're not turning the ball over. You know what I mean? Like if they play their A game, they might beat Iowa State by 10. But, you know, Iowa State is probably thinking the same thing. If we play our A game the night we play the Longhorns, we might beat their butts by 10 or more, by double digits. So I don't know. It feels like you and I end up in this place every summer. It comes down to what we think the quarterback play is going to be. Because if you told me that Texas was going to get a quarterback efficiency season that was in line with what Sam Ehlinger did a year ago, so in the 150s, let's say, that feels like an 8-4, 9-3 season. It feels very 9-3 to me. If you tell me that Texas is getting Sam Ehlinger level quarterback play in the passing game all season long, it comes down to what you and I think Casey Thompson and or Hudson Card can do over the course of a full season with Steve Sarkisian as their quarterback. Because if they can get above that mark, I can easily be talked into a 9-3, 10-2, and or depending on how high that number actually went, 11-1.
Yeah, I mean, because to your point, Ketch, you know, there's a point where we felt like, we talked about this before, we felt like going into last season, Sam Ehlinger should have been the best quarterback in the Big 12. And he's a 4-year starter. Oklahoma had a freshman, should have been better than Brock Purdy. We said that if there's ever a year, this would have to be it. Not going to put it all on Sam, clearly. There were some struggles that we could definitely talk about. And there's some come from behind games where Sam played great in the second half and overtime, but there were some struggles in the first half. If we see it, you know, a quarterback, whichever one it is, I know you think it's going to be Hudson. I'm leaning towards Casey is what I believe. But if we feel like Steve Sarkisian, being the quarterback whisperer that he is, if he can go in and Texas in just about every game has the best quarterback out of anybody on the field, then all of a sudden you can see what happens. Because Ketch, you talked about the OU game, and you said take that one out the equation. But we saw back in, 2018, where OU had the better quarterback with Kyler Murray. He was the better quarterback on the field. He was the number 1 overall draft pick. We know he was the best quarterback on the field that day. But Sam Ehlinger played a game where he went toe-to-toe. Kyler Murray blinked, and that's what Texas needed to pull it off. I've seen Texas beat them in 2018. We saw a Charlie Strong team beat OU. So we know once we get there, that's kind of a coin flip back in Dallas, all kind of crazy things. But I can talk myself into it with 2 things happening, Ketch. One, I feel like the Texas has the best quarterback that's out there, like at least on the field. And then I feel like, Ketch, if you got Bijan getting the ball the way we envision that he'll get the ball, not the way that Sarkisian tried to talk us out of that in the spring and tried to talk about maybe Roshan getting half the touches because he's so impressed. When we talk about all BS aside, if he's saying that's my dude, and everything about Sarkisian's history says he uses a workhorse running back, if he's getting over 20 touches a game and is being as effective as we think he can be, then all of a sudden, that 10-11, I think is way more realistic.
I almost think Bijan Robinson doesn't matter this season unless the quarterback play is good. Like, that's how important the quarterback position is Bijan can't carry this program to a 10-win season if the quarterback play is mediocre. He just can't. We saw Deontay Foreman have the best season any running back in the country had, and it got his coach fired. Like, the reality is, and look, I saw Ricky Williams in 1997 put together a season, an incredible season, like multiple 300-yard games. And the team went 4-7, and his coach got fired. Two of the best running back seasons in the history of this school, and they both happened within the last 25 years. All-time good historic seasons at the running back position in the year a coach got fired. So when I think about what has to happen in order for this team to hit its ceiling, it's quarterback, and I don't even care. We're back to this conversation that we had a year ago. I don't care about anything else. I don't care about Bijan. I don't care about the defense. How good is the quarterback going to be? Because when we think about Texas and OU being a 50-50 game-ish, just in general, because things happen. We've seen Charlie Strong win that game, right? They won that game because Sam Ehlinger played the best game of his career, arguably, right? I mean, it would either be that or Georgia, but he was sensational in that overtime win in the win over against Oklahoma, where Kyler Murray was the one that day that turned the ball over, blinked a couple of times. Sam never blinked, but that's what it took. It took Sam hitting his ceiling. And the same thing will be true about these other guys. They'll have to play at a sensational level for Texas to beat Oklahoma this year, in a year when they have coming into this season arguably the number one NFL quarterback prospect in all of college football. I mean, that's where Spencer Rattler is today. And to be fair, that dude had a 175 quarterback efficient. That's incredible.
Yeah.
His efficiency rating would be the school record at Texas. It was like fifth best in 5 years at Oklahoma.
It's
stupid. It's stupid.
They're different.
But and the thing with Sam, and this is why Sam ended up being a little bit of fool's gold, certainly for me, because I picked Texas when Sam went into his, coming off of that Sugar Bowl win. I picked Texas. I thought Sam would be better than Jalen Hurts. I thought he would. Not by a lot, but I thought it would be better, and he wasn't. Because game in and game out, the best Sam Ehlinger didn't rear his head enough for the Longhorns. So if you're Texas this year, you would take a steadier, good version of quarterback play. If you knew what guy you were getting every single week and that guy was good, this team has a chance to be really good. What it can't afford to do is for either quarterback, whether it's Casey Thompson or Hudson Card. And look, they're both going to be, either one starts their first career football game against Louisiana. Like, there's a lot of growing. That I don't care if Casey Thompson's graduated or not. He hasn't played a lot of football. He still has to develop and grow. But if they can avoid the normal quarterback pratfalls and their quarterback, and look, they've got the quarterback whisperer. I don't know that this is even a conversation if Steve Sarkisian isn't the quarterback's coach, but he is at worst, top 5 quarterback coach in all of college football. At worst. I mean, he's worked with Carson Palmer. He's worked with Matt. And I mean, when I say worked with, I mean, he's been their quarterback's coach and or their offensive coordinator for Carson Palmer, for Matt Leinart, for Mark Sanchez, for Jake Locker, for Tua. I mean, we're almost in the double digits with how many sensational quarterbacks that he's had. So I think that is Texas's hope. But to me, this is none of this 10-2 and 11-1 happens unless Texas has the second team all Big 12 quarterback this year.
One of the last things I'll say, Ketch, on the subject, that's fair. Because I think if we look up the stats, that would probably be very accurate. I mean, usually the top quarterback in this conference is, usually OU, and they're winning it, right? So, to get to that hurdle, get over that hurdle, you've got to have a quarterback that's going to be better than OU. That you've got to really, when you got to go back to like teams that have won the Big 12 without outstanding quarterback play, you got to go back to I think Kansas State. Was a split the conference championship many years ago. That's probably one of the last times you didn't have outstanding QB play. But one thing that is a benefit for Texas potentially, and we will see. And Ketch, I think you and I, we agree on this. We like Steve Sarkisian's ability to be on the field calling plays. Like you and I talked a lot about that when Herman was here. And look, we gave Herman a little bit shit, but to his credit, they did have an efficient offense at some point, right? I mean, so even though he was uncomfortable doing that, the offense ended up being very efficient at times. But I like the QB coach being able to go down and maybe have a conversation with the quarterback on the sidelines. Never been a huge fan of the headset. I know coaches like to be up in the booth, but I like a guy who's down there on the field. And look, his results as a quarterback coach and offensive coordinator shows with the production of his quarterbacks, right? I think there's something to be said for being down there in the flow of things, being able to see your quarterback eye to eye as a former quarterback, so I think those things were, potentially were to the benefit of that offense being, a little bit better, especially when you got to match wits with Lincoln Riley, and that guy's effing good. I know Texas fans don't like it. They're probably tired of us. It's funny. We always talk about this. The Texas fans are probably tired of us saying how good Lincoln Riley is, and OU fans think all we do is shit on OU. And it's like, finally. And so here we are, like, no fan base wants to hear us talk about it. And we're like, no, this is what we're saying. But when you've got to match wits with a Lincoln Riley, because that's essentially what you're going to have to do to get to a conference champ, you've got to go through OU. It is what it is. They are the top dog, and that's the team that you've got to knock off. That's the team Iowa State is going to try to knock off. That's the team Texas is trying to knock off. They are the top dog. 6 straight conference championships. It don't happen by accident. There's been one guy who's been there for a long period of time. So you've got to be able to match wits. And that's the thing that I think Texas fans have to have hope that Sarkisian, from an offensive standpoint, in a conference that's not going to focus a whole lot on defense. I mean, we're not going to see it in the Big 12. He may have had to focus in on defense a little bit, obviously, in the SEC, because SEC is going to have those kind of dogs here, Ketch. You're not going to have those kind of dogs, at DB. You're not going to have all those dogs at safety. You definitely, Ketch, aren't going to have those dogs on defensive line. Like, you're not going to see that. So if this is going to be an offensive game, and it's going to be offensive firepower with hoping your defense makes a few stops, there you go. Maybe that plays into Sarkisian's hands. That's the last thing I wanted to say.
Yeah, and I'll just follow up. I think it's a great point. I think that when you talk about Tom Herman's comfort level as a must be, what Texas thought they were getting when they hired Tom Herman was Steve Sarkisian, which was a guy that was going to produce an absolute elite offense and have no issues controlling that and being the guy and multitasking, like the whole, it is difficult to be a head coach and to call plays from the field. Right? I mean, it is. But the guys that make $8-9 million a year, like that's part of the deal.
That's kind of it, right? That's like me saying, hey, Catch, I like writing, but I just can't do game stories. So, but I can do the other stuff. So can you have someone that goes to the game and writes for me and does the video afterwards? And I'll just do the stuff like Monday through Friday.
Yeah. And like, there's a world where that's okay, but not the world where you're paid among the best, when you're at the elite, you know what I mean? Like, and when Tom Herman says, I don't know that I feel good doing that, that's not a problem. It just means you shouldn't have been hired at Texas. And when he said it, like my eyes popped out of my head. It was one of the first things you wanted to hear from Sarkisian was, hey, FYI, that whole being the head coach and calling the plays thing, you okay with that? And he's like, oh yeah, hey, no big deal. Like I'm used to it. And it's the only way I would even know how to do it. Yes. That is exactly what you want to hear. The head coach that you hired and you're going to pay a lot of money to be in charge of the offense. You just want to hear him say he's comfortable being in charge of the offense. And, look, there's this argument out there that Texas, even though they lost their quarterback, even though they lost their best pass rusher, even though they lost their best offensive lineman, arguably the three most important players on any football team, Texas lost seniors. And they're all in the NFL. They all got drafted. I mean, they lost NFL players at cornerstone positions. There's a world out there where Steve Sarkisian and the staff are really, really good. And I don't know how to quantify, and I'll just end it with this, because I just don't know how to quantify what great coaching means, because I don't know that I've consistently seen it at Texas ever. So if this staff is what everybody thinks it can be, I've never seen that at Texas before. And
what about during Mac? You didn't see that?
No. I mean, there were years on the defensive side of the ball when you knew, okay, Greg Robinson and Will Muschamp, they got it on lockdown. Like you trusted those sides of the ball. But on the offensive side of the ball, Greg Davis was there was all the way from beginning to end, every single game he ever coached, there was always a worry that Greg Davis would mess it up, that he would go into a shell in the big games. It happened so many times against Oklahoma. It didn't change until he had Vince Young and then followed that up with Colt McCoy. So when he had special quarterback play, the best quarterback play that this school has ever seen, Greg Davis looked fantastic. But when he had anything less than elite of the elite quarterback play, the general feeling was that he was a mediocre offensive coordinator and not a guy that you could bank on going into a big game. He'll be ready, and his offense, take it to the bank. They're getting 30. You never did that with Greg Davis outside of really when he had Vince Young and then Colt McCoy for a year. But even when Texas last went to the national championship and won, a Big 12 championship in 2009, the offense was hot garbage for a lot of that year. Colt McCoy wasn't great, and Greg Davis had nothing to elevate that group and make it better. And I'm a Greg Davis fan. Like, he's the greatest offensive coordinator probably in the history of the school when you look at everything that he did. Mm-hmm. But you didn't trust him if he didn't have the Jimmies and the Joes. And let me put it like this. With this team and this crop of offensive players, by extreme margins, you would want Steve Sarkisian in charge of it instead of Greg Davis. By extreme margins. But depending on what you think of Sam Ehlinger, I'd make a case that Greg Davis would have got more out of Sam Ehlinger than Tom Herman did. Unless you just think that Sam Ehlinger was just okay, and all of the best stuff that we ever saw from him was a bit of a mirage. And I've always thought there was more that Sam could have done. I think people around Sam, Texas fans today feel like Sam could have been better. and was held back by coordinator changes every year, Tom Herman not being elite. That's fair. So I can't wait to see what it looks like when someone who is deemed as elite is in charge of things, because other than a couple of seasons with very special defensive coordinators, I mean, Greg Robinson's got a Super Bowl ring for winning Super Bowls as a DC with the Denver Broncos. So they had that guy. And then you had Will Muschamp, a guy who's won national championships and has been a head coach because of his prowess on the defensive side of the ball. When they had those two guys, you can put your head on a pillow at night and know that Texas had elite coaching. For most of the last 25 years, take out those isolated examples out of the equation. I've never actually seen a team that's as good at coaching as Texas fans think their coaching is this year.
Fascinating. Well,
never seen it.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, so look, that again, when you want to talk about how good do you think this coach, and this isn't me talking to you, Anwar, this is me just talking to the audience. How good do you think this coaching staff is? How good do you think an elite offensive coach can make a new quarterback? Because if you believe the answers to those questions are, I think this coaching staff is elite and we'll see it this season, and I think Sarkisian can put together quarterback play as good at least as Sam Ehlinger was a year ago, then the ceiling for this team has a chance to be 11-1. They could, this team just in no shape, form, or fashion to me looks playoff good. But other than OU, there's nobody that they're going to face that's that good. So, like
11-1 would make you playoff good, by the way, Catch.
11-1 would get, well, the problem is at 11-1, you have to play an extra game, and that might turn into 11-2, and that might still get you into the play. I mean, it's hard for me to see Texas like a Big 12 team getting the number 4 spot in the playoffs when one of the teams has 2 losses to the same team. So, so that would play them out. But in a world where there's a 12-team playoff, they're in, absolutely. Even with a loss to Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship game. So we're going to get real close. I can't wait till we get to a point where Texas fans only see because 10-2 this year would be a really good season. It really, but in the way we view Texas football seasons, where it's not a success unless they either play in a major bowl game and or win the Big 12 championship at a minimum. Like that's the floor for a season to be memorable in this town, to be a success. But 10-2 in year 1 under Sark is the type of thing that would have me believing that 11-1 or 12-0 becomes very possible.
100%. If this team goes 10-2, with a quarterback that will be there the following year.
Yep.
Bingo. 100%. If your quarterback returns, Bijan returns, a lot of your key guys return at that point, then you have permission to dream big.
Choo choo. Like at that point, the hype train, this time 12 months from now, if Texas goes 10-2 this year, it'll be out of control. Texas will have somebody in the Heisman conversation at the start, like legitimately at the start of the season. They'll be potentially Big 12 favorites because Spencer Rattler, this is last year.
Yeah.
So Oklahoma's loaded with young quarterbacks, but they'd be breaking in a guy next year. So 10-2, returning your star quarterback and your All-American tailback. Yeah, man. Like, by
the way, Oklahoma breaks in a quarterback every couple of years.
Well, they do. They keep going number 1 overall in the draft too. Like, and the only guy that couldn't get to number 1 in the draft is the starting quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles after like 5 minutes. By the way, that I officially win the Jalen. Like, I've allowed you to have the Andrew Beck win, right? Because eventually he's in the NFL and like, okay,
yes.
But I win the Jalen Hurts, right? Because he's a starter in the NFL.
What was the discussion though? Refresh my memory on that.
Oh, it was a little bit like the Casey Thompson deal, where it was like we just have to acknowledge at the end of the year when he was at Oklahoma that he was a good player, like really good.
Yeah. Oh,
he's a little bit. There weren't any stats attached to it.
Yeah,
it was just, is he good or is he? And he's in an Oklahoma offense, and that makes him look better than he is. In the end, he was good for the Eagles.
He showed the mortality in that Texas game that I had thought he would show, and that many of the people, my sources told me they could probably potentially get out of him. The thing is, they couldn't capitalize on it. They couldn't capitalize on those turnovers. And at the end, OU wins. But at the end of the day, no, he's a badass. He's just a guy that if he was at the OU recruiting weekend, he would have had to bring the Mercedes as opposed to CD and Kyler bringing their what was it? Was it a Bentley and a Rolls or some craziness that? Yeah. So it would have been like that. But
I was just gonna say, OU fans got mad at me because I commented on the cars that they put on the field. I thought that was a great idea.
What did they get mad at you about? I thought it was fantastic. I remember it.
Because I wrote subtle, but like that's not a slam. Just because there's nothing subtle about putting a Rolls Royce on a football field doesn't mean that I didn't think it was a great idea. Like it's weird. Like I said, I get in trouble every day. For saying things that don't mean what people think they mean. They're like, oh, well, did you see that Texas did this thing last week where they photoshopped players with their favorite cars? And I was like, yeah, but that's not the same thing. And I really dig rolling the Rolls Royce into the end zone so kids can take pictures next to it. Let me just put it like this. If I was 17 years old and I was in a football uniform and you put me in front of a Rolls Royce, that'd be one of my favorite pictures I take all summer.
All summer. That'd be my background. We were as young people, I mean, think of the posters that you had of cars, as a young person. Like everyone, teenage boys love cars. I'm not saying teenage girls don't love cars as well, but from the purpose of this conversation, love cars. That's why I've always said all gas, no brakes should actually have cars out there. All gas, no brakes. Get it? Like
a burnt orange Lamborghini.
Put a burnt orange Lamborghini out there. All gas, no brakes. Who's posing for? I much rather that. I don't know what okay, I'm not going to get into
that. Would be so sick, Anwar.
It would be amazing. Sick. It would be a burnt orange Lamborghini in the end zone. That is bad. That is your all gas, no brakes.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm with you. Out of the budget.
On the same page.
You might be out of the budget, but make it happen. So there's enough billionaires. Somebody could donate it.
McConaughey's got to have a burnt orange Lamborghini.
Right?
Ferrari, something. Because Oklahoma rolled out the Rolls Royce. How many Rolls Royces can there even be in the state of Oklahoma?
None, because they drove in from Texas.
Austin is like Miami in a way. I know someone's got a bright ass burnt orange Lamborghini somewhere. I know they do. They do. It's there. Make it happen, Texas. Make it happen. Use some of that money. In the end, maybe one of these athletes can take their NIL money and splurge on the burnt orange Lamborghini. Look, we did the opposite of yesterday where it was we didn't mean to get him down in the dumps talking about what a basement would look like. We start talking about ceilings. The next thing you know, we're talking about Rolls Royces and Ferraris, and it's good times. But we'll wrap it up. Look, we'll do it again tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow will be a good buy or sell day.
Yes.
Could be. Tomorrow could be buy or sell Wednesday. We'll take your questions submitted both on Twitter, social media, and Orange Bloods. Until then, for Geoff Ketchum and Anwar Richardson, like the video, subscribe to the channel. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Later.